Friends, tonight is a challenging text, and as Matt already said, it deals explicitly with topics of rape and incest and the silencing of women. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself and your families. As Matt also said, the conversation does not end here. It does not end with this sermon. All the doors of your ministers are open at any time in the days and weeks and months and years to come. We are here to keep the conversation going. I believe we have a responsibility to tell this story in our church. And I believe it is our responsibility to face the reality of sexual abuse and history, the reality of sexual abuse and assault in our own history, both biblically and in our much more recent history. Will you all please pray with me? Oh God, you are the God who resides with us, who listens and who loves. And good God, tonight we sit with a painful story. We sit with a story that is not easy to hear, maybe because there are echoes of our own story within it, or maybe because we would rather not acknowledge our own capacity for cruelty and violence. Maybe both. So God, help us to listen, help us to stay present, help us to find the courage to share our own stories and our own truth, and help us, your community, to rest in the hope that truth-telling leads to healing, and that sharing our experiences can lead to transformation. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all the hearts gathered here be acceptable to you, O God, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. You can follow along in your bulletin from the 13th chapter of 2 Samuel. We hear one part of Tamar's story. Some time passed. David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and David's son Amnon fell in love with her. Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shemaiah. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. He said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill, and when your father comes to see you, you say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me something to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, so that I may see it and eat from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, so that I may eat from her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, where he was lying down. She took dough, kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. Then she took the pan and set them out before him, but he refused to eat. Amnon said, "Send everyone out from me." So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, Bring the food into the chamber so that I may eat from your hand." So Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. But when she brought them near him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." She answered, "No, my brother, do not force me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do anything so vile. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be one of the scoundrels in Israel. Now therefore I beg you, speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon was seized with a very great loathing for her. Indeed, his loathing was even greater than the lust he had felt for her. Amnon said to her, "Get out." But she said, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for this is how the virgin daughters of the king were clothed in earlier times. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. But Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart." So Tamar remained, a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard all of these things, he became very angry, but he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had raped his sister Tamar. I don't know if God's still speaking in that text, friends, but I can really tell you I didn't want to preach on it. I spent a long time this week looking for a distraction, a nice tidy anecdote. I would much rather make you guys laugh than do this. And all the commentaries I read actually seemed to want to help me with that. They wanted me to find that detail so that we didn't have to look at the rest of the story. They talk about how this is included in the history because we needed some explanation for Absalom's rebellion, for his eventual murder of Amnon. Or they get down in the weeds about whether or not incest was really a crime for the royal family. I don't think it was a good thing. For some inexplicable reason, some of them want to determine what kind of cake Tamar was baking. Humans have an extraordinary ability to look away from what we do not want to see. We get really creative with our deflections so that we don't have to sit with the violence that is inflicted. We focus on those particulars because we don't want to look at the young girl who is abused by someone she should have been able to trust. In our own very human way, and our often knee-jerk attempt to get away from pain, we do not listen to the most important voice in this story. Tamar's voice. Yes. Her refusal, her plea, her wisdom, her courage, her grief, her anger, it's all right there. Loud and clear. "No, my brother, do not force me. No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." but he would not listen to her. Church, we cannot keep silencing Tamar.
Yes.
There are so many kinds of silence. Some silence is good. It's the silence that makes space for pain, that does not crowd it or hurry it along or shut it up, that allows us to sit with it. But there's another really pervasive kind of silence that is forced, that requires a swallowing of pain and a secret shame that we force too many people to carry alone.
Yes.
Simply because we don't want our worldview or power balance interrupted. Amnon does not listen to Tamar. Even Absalom tells her to be quiet.
Yes.
We cannot keep telling others to be silent about their pain. A few months ago, Jen Harvey stood in this very room and told us that when we protect our children from heartbreak in a world that is so continually heartbreaking, we strip away their humanity. To close our eyes to the pain of another is a refusal to see their humanity. And in the action of turning away, we lose ours.
Yes.
Stories like Tamar's are painful. They reveal a side of human nature that we would rather not face. But if we pretend that they do not exist or that they do not happen, if we give our tacit approval through silence and forcing silence onto others, we do lose our humanity. If we love our neighbors, if we love women, trans and cisgendered women, and men, trans and cisgendered men, we cannot ask them to be silent about their experiences. If we love them, we cannot ask any of God's children to be silent about their experiences. God tells us to love them. It's kind of the big thing God tells us. And so, yeah, there's a lot we could do with this text. Probably could spend a whole month just preaching on this text, actually, is what I came to the disturbing conclusion of about 3:30 this afternoon. I'm never going to cover it. There's villains I could focus on. There are far too many individuals who are complicit in Amnon's actions. There are so many directions we could go. We need to read it more often, folks. But all I could keep coming back to was the woman who's standing there in the middle of it. The woman whose story it is. And I've decided this is just part of her story.
Yes.
This is not her whole story. This is the part where she says no, and the part where it doesn't matter. A part where she rebukes her brother not once but twice for his actions, for his assault, and his wish that it didn't happen. Amnon would have her silence, but Tamar refuses to give him that silence. She grieves loudly, rending her garments, throwing ash on her head. There is nothing silent or subtle about that. She grieves so loudly that her brother Absalom knows exactly what has happened as soon as he sees her. And yet, he too counsels silence. Today, we still live in a culture where women and men are not rewarded for speaking up about the assault or the abuse or the violence that they have suffered. Even now, it can feel like a lot of silence is ending, like the stories are finally being told. But even now, the possible repercussions are huge. From your work, from your school, from the church, from our courts, nowhere are you rewarded for telling your story. the chance of being actually listened to and not blamed or asked what you did to deserve it, are still many times too slim. And so we got to keep working to change that. Our church has to keep working to change that. The church has a long history of reading these texts through the eyes of the powerful. It's what we've done for thousands of years. It has a long history of being complicit with abuse just like this and siding with the oppressor time and time again. It has a long history of silencing the truth tellers, and that history reaches right up into this present year. No more. We cannot be a community that shames and silences one another, and we cannot be a community that chooses to keep our sinfulness in the shadows. Do I think there's good news in this text? Do I think God is present in it? Maybe. But only if we start telling Tamar's story. Only if we start really grappling with it. Only if we teach our children to do better. And only if we hold one another accountable for our actions and stop placing blame on those who do nothing to deserve it. Only if we stop valuing certain lives over others. In order to change, in order to transform, we must be willing to look at our own evil in the eye. I don't know where God is in this text, guys, but I do know there's a call for us in this text from the church. It's a call for listening and for belief and for heartbreak and for grief and for solidarity. It's a call for truth-telling and a call to examine our own history, Plymouth's history. Women weren't called deacons not so long ago.
Yeah.
We must tell the stories. We must uncover the stories so that we too can join Tarana Burke, the woman who founded the Me Too movement over a decade ago.
Okay.
We must join her in her fight to end all sexual violence. And for now, I don't believe Tamar's story ends in verse 20. I don't believe it ends with her, a desolate woman in her brother's house. That's just where the historians lost interest.
Yeah.
David's story was more important than hers. I believe she grieved and she raged and she told her story for years to come. Still angry, still in pain, and yet rebuilding. In the next chapter, we learn she has a niece named for her. She had nephews. We don't know anything else, but I believe she had community. And I believe she raised those children better. Tamar survived. That's what I choose to believe. And what I know is that healing comes with truth-telling. There's wholeness to be found in acknowledging our brokenness. And there's humanity to be found in our witness to the pain of others. I'm going to give you some homework as you leave tonight. The first of those is to go turn on Netflix or go to a friend's house that has Netflix and watch Hannah Gadsby's new special. It's only an hour, but it's momentous, and we all need to watch it. She ends with the simple statement that stories hold our cure. Stories are our point of connection. Stories have the potential to heal us. And stories must be shared, because it is not our right as children of God to suppress the story of any other child of God. We do not get to decide whose story is most important and whose story makes us too uncomfortable to listen to.
Yeah.
We don't get to place a value on another's humanity. We're called to love God and ourselves and our neighbors. And I think love starts with listening. We don't get to know the rest of Tamar's story, but we can know each other's. And so, friends, this table is where we come to know God and one another. Here, right here, we bring our stories and our truth, our brokenness and our strength. Here is where the community meets each week. And where we remember that while a part of our God's story is betrayal and death, it is not the whole. We come to remember this one part because it is important to keep telling the truth of this part. But we also remember that it is not the whole. And so it was on the eve of his betrayal and death that Jesus took bread and broke it. Saying to his disciples that this is my body which is broken for you. Eat this and remember me. And in the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink of it, and remember me." Let us pray.